The crimson sand of the Nexus arena had drunk the blood of 1,000 warriors, but it had never tasted the fury of a child. Commander Zethkar stood at the arena's edge, his 4 arms flexing as he surveyed the pathetic figure across the pit. The human was small, barely reaching his chest, with pale skin and dark hair that fell across frightened eyes. The crowd of alien spectators roared their approval from the towering stands, their bioluminescent crests flashing in waves of excitement. They had come to see the execution of the last human, the final act in the Dominion's centuries-long campaign of extermination. Begin the trial. The arena master's voice boomed across the stadium, his serpentine form coiled around the central pillar. Let the crimes of humanity be answered in blood. Zethkar had volunteered for this duty. He had lost his clutch brothers to human expansion fleets, watched his homeworld burn under their nuclear fire. This small creature before him represented everything he despised, the arrogance, the violence, the endless hunger that had driven humanity to challenge the galactic dominion itself. The human child, no more than 12 solar cycles, if Zethkar's intelligence was correct, stood motionless in the center of the arena. The boy's name was Marcus, salvaged from the wreckage of the last human colony ship. The Dominion had debated his fate for months before deciding that a public execution would serve as the perfect symbol, humanity's future cut short, their legacy ended by their own weakness. Zethkar drew his plasma blade, its edge crackling with contained energy. The weapon had carved through starship hulls and enemy battle armor. It would make quick work of soft human flesh. Any last words, child of Terra? Zethkar called across the arena, his translator converting his clicks and growls into the dead language of Earth. Marcus looked up, and for the first time, Zethkar saw his eyes clearly. They weren't the eyes of a frightened child. They were ancient, weary, filled with a sadness that seemed to stretch across eons. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible above the crowd's bloodthirsty chanting. The words struck Zethkar as odd, but he dismissed them. Human cubs were known for their emotional instability. The boy was probably apologizing for his species' crimes, too little, too late. The arena master's tentacle struck the ceremonial gong. The trial had begun. Zethkar charged across the sand, his 4 arms pumping, plasma blade raised for a killing strike. The crowd's roar intensified. 30 meters. 20. 10. The human child hadn't moved, hadn't even raised his hands in defense. This would be easier than he'd thought. 3 meters away, Zethkar leaped, blade descending toward the boy's neck. Victory was his. Then the child looked up again, and everything changed. The sadness in Marcus's eyes ignited into something else, not anger, not hatred, but a profound, cosmic disappointment. Reality seemed to pause, suspended in a moment that stretched like taffy. The arena's roar faded to a whisper. I said I was sorry, Marcus repeated, and this time his voice carried the weight of dying stars. The first second, every weapon in the arena, plasma rifles, neural disruptors, the security drones hovering above the crowd, simply ceased to function. Metal crumbled to dust. Energy cells went dark. The Dominion's greatest military technology became worthless scrap in an instant. The second, the arena's artificial gravity failed, but only for the aliens. Zethkar found himself suspended in mid-air, his 4 arms flailing uselessly as he watched the crowd of spectators begin to float like leaves in a cosmic wind. The human boy remained planted firmly on the sand, unaffected by the impossible phenomenon occurring around him. The second, understanding crashed over Zethkar like a tidal wave of ice water. The human child wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't a victim. He was something else entirely, something that had allowed itself to be captured, something that had played along with the Dominion's plans for reasons beyond comprehension. Marcus raised one small hand, and the floating aliens gently settled back into their seats. Gravity returned to normal. Zethkar collapsed to the sand, his plasma blade now nothing more than an ornate handle. You wanted to end the human threat, Marcus said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the silent arena without amplification. But you never understood what that threat really was. The boy began to walk toward Zethkar, his bare feet leaving no prints in the crimson sand. With each step, the commander felt something fundamental shift in the universe around them. We weren't dangerous because we were violent, Marcus continued. Every species is violent. We weren't dangerous because we were numerous, the Zarathi have us beat there. We weren't even dangerous because we were clever, though we had our moments. He stopped directly in front of Zethkar, who found himself unable to move, unable to speak, but somehow still able to think, still able to understand the magnitude of what was happening. We were dangerous, Marcus said softly, because we were potential. Raw, unlimited potential. And when you killed us, when you scattered us, when you thought you had ended us. He smiled, and it was the saddest smile Zethkar had ever seen. You gave that potential time to evolve. The truth hit the commander like a physical blow. The human colonies hadn't been destroyed. They had been transformed. The survivors hadn't died, they had become something new, something that transcended the petty conflicts of flesh and blood. The child you see before you is what humanity became, Marcus said, his form beginning to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. And now, the trial is over. The arena began to change. The blood-stained sand became fertile soil. The walls of metal and stone transformed into living wood and crystal that pulsed with gentle light. The weapons and armor of the spectators became tools of art and creation. The Dominion is ended, Marcus announced to the stunned crowd. Not through conquest, but through transformation. You will learn to build instead of destroy, to nurture instead of consume. This is humanity's gift to you. The chance to become more than you were. Zethkar felt his hatred melting away, replaced by something he had never experienced before, hope. The bitter rage that had defined his existence for decades simply disappeared. As Marcus faded from view, his final words echoed through the transformed arena, "We forgive you. Now forgive yourselves." The child was gone, but his presence lingered like the warmth of a distant star. Where the human boy had stood, a small tree began to grow, its branches reaching toward the artificial sky as if seeking something beyond the confines of the arena. The 3-second war was over. The age of peace had begun. And in the silence that followed, Zethkar wept for the first time since his childhood, mourning not for what he had lost, but for all the years he had spent choosing hatred over hope.